You've probably had the experience of waiting for an answer and then receiving it in a form so different from what you imagined that for a moment you weren't sure whether the answer had arrived at all. The story of UFO disclosure is unfolding in exactly that way. Not as the dramatic single revelation that most people expected, but as something slower, stranger, and in many respects, more significant. Mrs. Jada Whitman, a researcher who has spent over 2 decades at the intersection of government transparency and unexplained aerial phenomena, says the most important thing about disclosure is not what has been confirmed, but what the confirmed information is quietly pointing toward. There is also a particular reason why the witnesses who have come forward describe their experiences in language that sounds less like science fiction and more like something else entirely. And that language shift turns out to matter enormously. If evenings of calm, careful inquiry are what bring you here, this is exactly the kind of conversation you'll want to settle in for. What disclosure is actually revealing about the phenomena and about us is more layered than any headline has yet managed to capture. What disclosure actually looks like from inside. Most people imagined disclosure as an event, a press conference, a definitive announcement, a moment when an official voice said clearly and finally, "Yes, this is real, here is what we know." What has actually unfolded is something categorically different, not an event, but a process, gradual and uneven, spread across years of congressional hearings, declassified documents, credentialed witnesses, and official acknowledgments that were worded carefully enough to confirm something without specifying what. Mrs. Jada Whitman describes this process as disclosure by accumulation, the truth arriving not in a single statement, but in the weight of many smaller confirmations that, taken together, cross a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. What makes this form of disclosure psychologically complex is that it requires active assembly on the part of the person receiving it. No single piece is conclusive, but the collection of pieces, the Navy's official acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena, the formation of dedicated government investigation offices, the testimony of intelligence officials under oath before Congress, builds for anyone tracking the progression into something that begins to have genuine shape. Not a complete picture, but a shape. And shapes once seen cannot be unseen, even when the details within them remain unresolved. The behavior shift that disclosure researchers like Mrs. Whitman note in the general public is one of gradual normalization rather than shock. Because the revelations have arrived incrementally rather than all at once, the response has not been the mass disruption that earlier theorists predicted. Instead, a quiet recalibration is occurring in the way people speak about the topic in private, in the questions they are willing to ask openly that they would not have asked 10 years ago, in the seriousness with which they now receive information that would previously have been dismissed without consideration. The conversation has changed, even if the full picture hasn't yet arrived, the part of the story nobody prepared us for. The cultural preparation for disclosure was almost entirely shaped by science fiction. And science fiction, for all its imagination, prepared people for the wrong things. It prepared them for spacecraft and extraterrestrial biology and the drama of first contact. What it did not prepare them for, and what the emerging picture of disclosure is actually presenting, is something more interior, more philosophical, and in some respects, more personally confronting than any of the scenarios the films imagined. The part of the story nobody prepared us for is the part that turns out to be about consciousness rather than technology. What serious researchers have increasingly noted is that the phenomenon, whatever its ultimate nature, appears to interact with the human mind in ways that physical objects are not supposed to be able to interact. Witnesses consistently report perceptual distortions, the compression and expansion of time, and experiences of apparent communication that occurred without any spoken language. These reports come from military personnel, commercial pilots, and credentialed scientists, people whose professional training emphasizes precise observation and careful reporting. They are not describing what they expected to see. They are describing something for which their existing categories were entirely inadequate. The aspect of this that most surprises researchers encountering it for the first time is its consistency across completely independent witnesses, people who have never met, who encounter the phenomenon in different countries, in different decades, in entirely different circumstances, describe the interior quality of the experience in language that overlaps in ways that chance cannot explain. This cross-witness consistency is the detail that the science fiction preparation most thoroughly failed to anticipate. The story isn't primarily about them, about what they are, where they come from, what they want. It appears to be, at least in part, about something in the nature of human perception itself. Take one slow breath and consider something you once dismissed and later discovered was real. The feeling of that recalibration, of the world quietly expanding past the edge of your previous assumptions, is the feeling that serious UFO researchers describe experiencing again and again over years of work. The phenomenon doesn't shout, it simply persists, patiently, specifically, until the dismissal becomes harder to maintain than the consideration. Why researchers stopped asking where they came from. The question that organized UFO research for most of its early history was essentially astronomical. Where do they come from? The assumption embedded in the question was that the phenomenon was primarily a physical one, craft of some kind, originating somewhere in space, arriving here through means of propulsion not yet understood by human science. This assumption seemed reasonable given the visual reports, and it shaped the research methodology of several generations of investigators. It turned out to be, if not wrong exactly, significantly incomplete. And the moment researchers began to recognize its incompleteness was the moment the field became genuinely interesting. Mrs. Jada Whitman traces her own pivot away from the where question to a specific category of case she encountered early in her research career. Cases where the physical evidence and the witness testimony were in direct contradiction. The physical trace evidence suggested something material had been present, but the witness testimony described interactions that physical objects cannot have with human consciousness. The contradiction couldn't be resolved by the existing model. And when a model consistently fails to resolve its central contradictions, the honest researcher eventually stops trying to fit new evidence into the old model and begins asking whether the model itself requires revision. The replacement question, the one that has organized the more sophisticated end of UFO research for the past decade, is not where, but what. Not where in space does this phenomenon originate, but what is the fundamental nature of what is being encountered. And this question, while more difficult to answer than a geographical one, has produced considerably more illuminating research, because it has forced investigators to examine not just the external characteristics of the phenomenon, but its relationship with the people who encounter it. And that relationship turns out to be the most consistently interesting thing about the whole story. As we go deeper into this video, there is a specific category of evidence that has emerged from the most recent wave of credentialed witnesses that changes the center of gravity of the entire conversation, and it has almost nothing to do with what the craft looked like. The question that changed everything for investigators. There is a moment in the history of any serious research field when a single well-posed question reorganizes everything that came before it. Not by answering the previous questions, but by revealing that they were pointing in a slightly wrong direction. For UFO research, that question arrived through the witness testimony of credentialed professionals who had direct experience with the phenomenon. And the question was this: why does the phenomenon appear to respond to attention? Not to radar, not to physical pursuit, but to focused human attention. Why do encounters tend to increase when investigators focus on a specific location? Why do witnesses report a quality of mutual awareness? Not just that they observed something, but that something observed them observing it. The implications of this question extend far beyond the logistics of aerial investigation. If the phenomenon responds to attention, if there is something about focused human perception that influences what the phenomenon does and how it presents itself, then it is not behaving like any known physical object. Known physical objects do not change their behavior based on whether they are being watched. Quantum particles do, under specific laboratory conditions, but that behavior does not translate to objects at the scale of aircraft. The attention responsiveness of the phenomenon, if the witnesses are accurately reporting what they experienced, places it in a category that existing physics does not have a comfortable home for. What investigators who have taken this question seriously have found is that the phenomenon appears to operate at the intersection of physical reality and something that physical reality alone cannot fully account for. This is not a comfortable conclusion for researchers trained in hard sciences, and the discomfort shows in how carefully they word their findings. But the precision of their discomfort is itself informative. When rigorous people choose their words with unusual care around a specific finding, it is usually because the finding is pointing somewhere that their existing framework is genuinely unable to follow. And that inability to follow is, in research terms, the most interesting direction available. What witnesses describe that files never captured. There is a specific quality of witness testimony that does not transfer well into official documentation. And understanding this gap explains why the declassified files, while confirming the phenomenon's reality, consistently feel like they are missing something essential. The files capture what instruments recorded: radar returns, infrared signatures, speed and trajectory data. They cannot capture what witnesses experienced from the inside. And the inside experience, as reported by the most credible witnesses across decades of investigation, contains details that are not merely interesting, but genuinely challenging to existing assumptions about the nature of physical reality. The most consistent interior detail that witnesses describe and files cannot capture is a quality of apparent purposefulness. Not random movement, not the behavior of an object simply following its own physics, but something that appears to be oriented toward the witness, toward the situation, toward something that the witness cannot entirely identify but describes in various terms as meaningful. Military pilots describe feeling assessed. Scientists observing the phenomenon from research stations describe a quality of being met, as though their curiosity were being registered and responded to. These descriptions are difficult to categorize. They are not the descriptions of people who saw a weather balloon or a classified aircraft. Mrs. Jada Whitman has collected hundreds of first-hand accounts over her research career, and the pattern she returns to most consistently is what she calls the aftermath quality. The specific way that people who have had close encounters describe their relationship with reality in the months and years following the experience. They tend to become less certain about things they were previously confident of, and more certain about things they previously found uncertain. Their professional skepticism remains intact. They are not converted into believers in any simple sense, but their relationship with the question of what consciousness is and what reality is shifts in ways that their professional frameworks were not designed to accommodate. The detail governments confirmed without saying so. There is a particular art form in official communications around sensitive topics, the art of the technically accurate statement that does not lie, but also does not fully illuminate. Governments that have moved toward greater openness on the UFO topic have become practiced in this art. What they have confirmed, through careful language and deliberate document releases, amounts to a specific set of acknowledgments. The phenomena are real. They are unidentified. They behave in ways our technology cannot account for. And they have been present in restricted airspace with a frequency that represents a genuine concern. What they have not confirmed, and have been equally deliberate about not confirming, is the question of origin and nature. The specific detail that governments have confirmed without explicitly stating it is the one that experienced researchers find most significant: that the phenomenon is not new. The implication embedded in the historical scope of declassified documents, the cases stretching back across the entire history of modern aviation and beyond, is that something has been present in human skies for the entirety of recorded technological history. This is not a recent arrival. Whatever this is, it has been here for a very long time. And an intelligence that has been present and observing for that duration is a categorically different kind of intelligence from the visiting alien civilization of popular imagination. The behavior shift that follows when a person genuinely absorbs this implication is a specific one that researchers who study public attitudes toward the subject have documented. The initial response tends to be a brief quality of vertigo, a sense of the familiar ground of assumed reality shifting slightly beneath the feet, followed, for most people, not by fear, but by a recalibration of curiosity. The question changes from, is this real, to what does it mean that this has always been real, and we are only now being told? And that second question, once asked, tends not to permit the comfortable return to the previous state of not having asked it. A retired air traffic controller named James spent 30 years professionally dismissing colleague reports of unusual radar returns as equipment anomalies. After retirement, he spent 2 years reading the declassified documentation now publicly available. He didn't become a believer in any dramatic sense. He simply, quietly stopped dismissing. There's a difference, he told his daughter, between not knowing the answer and pretending the question doesn't exist. He found the distinction, at 71, surprisingly freeing. Why some evidence points somewhere deeply unexpected. The trajectory of serious UFO research over the past decade has moved in a direction that most of its early practitioners did not anticipate, away from the extraterrestrial hypothesis and towards something that several leading researchers now describe, with careful qualification, as an interdimensional or consciousness-based model. This is not the conclusion most people expected from a field that began with photographs of lights in the sky and radar anomalies. But it is where the evidence, accumulated across decades and evaluated by increasingly credentialed researchers, appears to be pointing. Not conclusively, but persistently and from multiple independent directions simultaneously. The evidence that points most strongly in this unexpected direction comes from the overlap between UFO encounters and other categories of anomalous experience that have traditionally been studied in entirely separate research silos. Near-death experiences, certain meditative states, and close encounter reports share a set of characteristics that, when placed in direct comparison, are difficult to explain as coincidental. The same quality of heightened perception, the same reports of apparent communication without language, the same aftermath transformation in how witnesses relate to time, death, and the nature of consciousness. The convergence of these separate phenomena is being noticed by a small but growing number of researchers who are willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads. What makes this direction so genuinely unexpected and so resistant to mainstream acceptance is that it requires expanding the scientific model of what reality is before the evidence can be properly evaluated within it. A phenomenon that interacts with consciousness in the ways described cannot be adequately studied using tools designed only to measure material objects. This is not an argument for abandoning scientific rigor. It is an argument for expanding what rigor is applied to. Several researchers at the leading edge of this conversation have spent significant portions of their careers making precisely this argument, quietly, carefully, with the particular patience of people who know that the direction they are pointing will eventually be recognized as correct, regardless of how long that recognition takes. What changed when scientists finally took it seriously? For most of its modern history, the UFO subject existed in a kind of institutional no man's land, too documented to be entirely dismissed, too anomalous to be comfortably integrated into existing scientific categories, and carrying too much cultural stigma for credentialed researchers to engage with professionally without risk to their reputations. This changed, slowly, then rather quickly, as the combination of military credibility, official government acknowledgement, and carefully documented evidence accumulated to a point where the cost of dismissal began to exceed the cost of engagement. Scientists began to look, and what they found when they looked seriously was not what the stigma had implied they would find. The first significant change that occurred when credentialed scientists began engaging seriously with the evidence was methodological. They brought measurement tools and documentation standards to the investigation that the field had previously lacked, and the quality of the evidence immediately improved. Incidents that had previously been dismissed as anecdotal were re-examined with proper protocols, and a meaningful percentage of them survived rigorous scrutiny in ways that anecdotal reports alone could not establish. The cases that remained unexplained after proper scientific examination were fewer in number, but significantly more challenging in character. Not, we couldn't identify it, but we cannot account for its behavior using any known physical principle. The subtler change, the one that took longer to surface but may ultimately be more significant, was a shift in the questions that serious scientists were willing to ask in professional settings. Questions about the relationship between observation and the phenomenon's behavior. Questions about what the consistent witness testimony might imply about the nature of consciousness. Questions about whether the measurement tools being used were adequate to the thing being measured. These questions would not have appeared in mainstream scientific discourse 10 years ago. Their appearance now, tentatively, carefully worded, but present, represents a genuine expansion of the conversation's official boundaries. And boundary expansions in science, once begun, tend not to reverse. The pattern across cases that nobody can explain. When UFO researchers apply systematic analysis to the full body of documented cases, not the outliers, not the dramatic single incidents, but the entire data set accumulated over decades of investigation, a pattern emerges that none of the current explanatory models can account for. It is not a pattern in the craft's appearance or behavior, though those have their own consistencies. It is a pattern in the timing and location of encounters relative to the emotional and psychological state of the witnesses involved. Cases cluster around specific human conditions in ways that physical objects should not be sensitive to. They appear with disproportionate frequency around moments of personal significance in witnesses' lives, around deaths and births and thresholds, around people who are, for reasons they cannot always articulate, paying a particular quality of attention. This pattern is the one that serious researchers discuss most carefully and publicly acknowledge least readily, because stating it plainly, that the phenomenon appears to be responsive to human emotional and psychological conditions, requires accepting an implication that most scientific frameworks are not equipped to process. It implies either that the phenomenon has awareness of human interior states, or that human interior states somehow influence the probability of encounter. Neither option is comfortable within a materialist scientific model. Both options, if true, would represent a fundamental revision of assumptions about the relationship between mind and world that have underpinned Western science for several centuries. Why the truth feels stranger than the fiction did. Science fiction served an important cultural function in preparing the human imagination for the possibility of non-human intelligence. But it did so by imagining that intelligence in human-shaped terms. The aliens of popular fiction had agendas, used technology, communicated in ways that could eventually be decoded, and existed in relationship to humanity in ways that, however exotic, followed recognizable logic. The emerging picture of what is actually being documented shares almost none of these characteristics. It does not follow recognizable logic. It does not behave like an intelligence pursuing a comprehensible agenda. It is stranger than the fiction was, and stranger in ways that are more interesting, not more frightening. The specific quality of strangeness that distinguishes the actual phenomenon from its fictional representation is its apparent indifference to the categories human perception imposes on it. It does not consistently appear as a craft. It does not consistently behave as a physical object. It does not maintain the same apparent scale or appearance across different observation angles. Witnesses frequently describe it as seeming to respond to the act of observation itself, appearing more defined when looked at directly, less so when observed peripherally. This is not behavior. This is something that the existing vocabulary of behavior does not quite cover. What disclosure reveals about us, not them. The most quietly significant aspect of the disclosure story, the one that receives the least attention in popular coverage, but that serious researchers return to most consistently, is what the entire history of humanity's relationship with this phenomenon reveals about human nature, rather than about the phenomenon itself. The sustained suppression of credible evidence, the social mechanisms that enforced dismissal, the career consequences faced by credentialed professionals who reported encounters honestly. These are not primarily a story about government secrecy. They are a story about the human need for a stable model of reality, and the lengths to which individuals and institutions will go to protect that stability from information that threatens it. The parallel history of how other paradigm-challenging discoveries were received, the gradual acceptance of germ theory, the resistance to plate tectonics, the long dismissal of meteorites as real objects despite consistent physical evidence, suggests that the UFO suppression is not anomalous. It follows a recognizable pattern in which the more fundamentally a new finding challenges existing assumptions, the more vigorous and sustained the resistance to accepting it tends to be. The UFO phenomenon challenges not a single scientific assumption, but the entire edifice of assumptions about what physical reality is and what place human consciousness occupies within it. The resistance, viewed in this context, is entirely predictable, and its gradual dissolution, which is what disclosure in its accumulated form represents, is also predictable. What will be most interesting to observe as disclosure continues its gradual unfolding is the quality of self-examination it produces in the human institutions and individuals who maintain the dismissal. Not as blame. The dismissal was, in most cases, genuinely motivated by the desire to maintain the stability of reliable knowledge, rather than by any malicious intent, but as an opportunity for honest reckoning with the mechanisms by which important truths get suppressed, not through conspiracy, but through the entirely ordinary human preference for comfortable certainty over uncomfortable possibility. That reckoning, when it comes, will be one of disclosure's most valuable and least anticipated gifts. The disclosure story is still being written, in congressional testimony rooms and research laboratories, and in the private accounts of people who have had experiences they cannot explain and are only now finding a world willing to take those experiences seriously. It is being written in the careful language of scientists who are following evidence into territory their training did not prepare them for. In the policy documents of governments navigating the gap between what they know and what they are prepared to say. In the gradually shifting conversation of ordinary people who are finding, one quiet revelation at a time, that the world is larger than the version of it they were handed. What you are a part of, simply by having engaged seriously with this conversation tonight, is that gradual expansion. The audience for careful, honest inquiry into genuinely difficult questions is itself part of how those questions eventually find their answers. Because serious questions require serious attention, and serious attention requires people willing to give it without demanding premature resolution. The phenomenon, whatever it ultimately is, has been patient for a very long time. It has persisted through dismissal and suppression and the long accumulation of evidence that is now finally beginning to find its way into the places where it can be properly examined. What happens next in this story will depend, as all important stories ultimately do, on the quality of curiosity and honesty that human beings bring to the asking. And that quality, on a quiet evening like this one, is already very much present.